People tossed coins at her feet as if she were a beggar. She was standing on a wet sidewalk in a downpour, 6 months pregnant, and had only $1,247 in the world. Her mother-in-law smirked and called it enough for a bus ticket out of town. Her own husband got into a car with his new woman and drove off, never even glancing back. Soaked and shamed, with absolutely nowhere to turn, Emma Hartwell had truly hit her lowest point. But they were all clueless about what was really happening. They didn't see the black Rolls-Royce that was just rounding the corner. They didn't know the billionaire sitting inside had been keeping an eye on her for the last 20 years, and they had no idea that the very company they used to ruin her was built on technology her own father had invented and they had stolen. What unfolds next is one of the most satisfying tales of revenge you will ever hear. It is the story of a pregnant woman with nothing left to lose, facing off against a billion-dollar empire. She didn't shout. She didn't plead for him to stay. She didn't even shed a tear. Instead, she just gave a small smile and turned away. A few moments later, she was being driven off in a billionaire's limousine, marking the true beginning of the war. You have to stick around for the whole story, because the way she dismantles their entire world will leave you speechless. This story will teach you something powerful. Silence is not weakness. It is patience. It is the calm before you play your winning cards. When the world throws you to the ground, you do not need to scream. You do not need to beg. You just need to remember who you are and what you are worth. If you have ever felt powerless, betrayed, or underestimated, this story is for you. Stay until the end. I promise the payoff is worth every second. And if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Inside the law offices of Sterling and Associates, the conference room on the 42nd floor felt freezing. It was not the kind of chill from an aggressive air conditioner, but a deep, penetrating cold that felt like a bad omen. The entire room was built to make people feel small, from its massive windows showing off the Seattle skyline to a polished mahogany table that cost more than an average person's yearly salary. Emma Hartwell was sitting all by herself at this enormous table, her hands placed over her pregnant belly in a protective gesture. She was 6 months along, utterly drained, and dressed in a worn-out maternity dress from a department store, its seams straining. Dark rings under her green eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights trying to figure out how her life had fallen apart so quickly. She used to be a corporate attorney, a very skilled one. She had graduated at the top of her class at Northwestern, the type of woman who was respected in every boardroom she entered. That woman felt like a distant memory now, like a character from another life. After 3 years of marriage to Marcus Vance, everything she believed about herself had been stripped away, leaving a hollow shell of a person who would jump at loud noises and constantly say sorry for just being there. The door opened. Marcus strode in first, the confident click of his Italian leather shoes on the marble floor announcing a man who felt entitled to everything. At 38 years old, he had the kind of handsome, airbrushed look that had initially drawn Emma to him. His dark hair was styled to perfection, his jawline was incredibly sharp, and a Rolex Submariner watch glittered on his wrist, a new gift to himself for a business deal she was never told about. Following him was Arthur Higgins, his lawyer. Arthur was 55, with the dead eyes of a predator and a known talent for ruining people's lives for $600 an hour. In his hand was a leather briefcase that likely held the documents that would finalize the destruction of Emma's world. However, it was the final person to enter who made Emma's heart stop. Victoria Vance glided into the room as if she already owned the place, and given her family's influence, she very well might. At 64 years of age, Marcus's mother was the perfect image of wealthy sophistication. A Hermes scarf was elegantly arranged around her neck. Her silver hair was flawlessly styled, and her eyes held the same look of barely hidden disgust she always had for Emma. Emma was not expecting her mother-in-law to be there. Marcus offered no greeting to his wife. He did not even look at the baby bump that held his own child. He just glanced at his Rolex and let out an annoyed sigh. "Let's get this over with quickly," he said, dropping into a chair across from her. "I have reservations for dinner." Victoria took a seat next to her son, adjusting her scarf with perfectly manicured hands. "I made sure to be here. Someone has to see that this is resolved without any mess." Arthur Higgins clicked open his briefcase and pulled out a sheaf of papers. He pushed them across the vast table, using only the end of his pen, as though the papers themselves were dirty. "The conditions are very simple," he stated, his voice having the practiced, slick tone of someone who has delivered terrible news many times. "Mrs. Vance will get the 2014 Honda Civic, the money in her personal savings account, which has a balance of $1,247, and a single payout of $5,000. Emma just looked at the figures on the page. $1,247. That was all she had been able to put aside in 3 years, hiding tiny bits of cash from the household money Marcus gave her, treating her like a teenager with a weekly allowance. $5,000. That was what her life was worth to the man who had promised to love and cherish her forever. She thought of the legal career she had abandoned, the major clients she had given up, the entire future she had set aside because Marcus claimed he wanted a wife who would be supportive, not a competitor. She thought of the home she kept clean, the dinners she prepared, and the endless parties she hosted with a fake smile, only to be torn apart in the car on the way home for everything from her choice of dress to her attempts at conversation. "That is a generous offer, Ellie," Marcus said, using the pet name she once adored but now could not stand. "The prenuptial agreement says you get 0. I am being kind." Emma's reply was soft, almost a whisper. "I gave up my entire career. I put all my energy into supporting you for 3 years. I am pregnant with your baby." Before Marcus could even think of a response, Victoria interrupted, her voice coated in a layer of fake sweetness. "Why don't we talk about that?" she said. She retrieved a folder from her Birkin handbag and set it down on the table. "We are going to need a paternity test before we proceed with any more discussions. Considering the timeline of events, we have some questions." The ugly accusation just hung there in the silent room. Emma felt her jaw clench. The baby inside her kicked, almost as if her unborn daughter could feel the cruelty surrounding them. "The man who came to install the home theater system?" Emma asked, struggling to keep her voice from trembling. "I believe I spoke with him twice." Victoria's smile was like ice. "Twice can be more than enough." Emma then turned her gaze to Marcus. She really studied his face, trying to find any sign of the man she had once loved. The man who had shown up with flowers on their 3rd date and called her the most amazing woman he had ever known. The man who had proposed to her on one knee in Central Park and swore he would love her forever. He refused to look at her. "Just sign the papers, Ellie," Marcus mumbled, suddenly fascinated by his own fingernails. "Just accept the money. Go start your life over somewhere else. You could move back to Iowa." "Your aunt still lives out there, doesn't she?" Victoria chimed in. "I am sure that $5,000 will stretch much further in a small town." The baby kicked again, this time with more force. Arthur Higgins cleared his throat with obvious impatience. "Mrs. Vance, we are on a schedule here." Emma looked down at the documents laid out before her. The only sounds in the room were the quiet drone of the building's climate control system and the faint noise of city traffic many stories below. She knew she could put up a fight. She could sue for a much larger settlement, drag the whole messy affair through the courts, and make them suffer for every single cruel word they had ever said to her. She was a lawyer, after all. She understood her legal rights, but she also understood the Vances. She understood their wealth, their network, and their absolute readiness to ruin anyone who dared to oppose them. She had personally seen Marcus destroy a business rival with a lawsuit so brutal that the man lost his company and his family. She had watched Victoria flash a charming smile at a charity event while giving quiet orders to have a troublesome board member fired. If she decided to fight them, they would utterly demolish her, and they would take pleasure in every moment of it. Emma reached for the cheap plastic pen that had been left for her, pointedly ignoring the fancy fountain pen Arthur Higgins had placed beside it. Her hand was perfectly steady. Her eyes were completely dry. She signed her name. Emma Hartwell, not Vance. It occurred to her then that she had never legally taken his name. That one small act of defiance now seemed like the most brilliant move she had ever made. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Is that all? Marcus's voice held a trace of shock, and maybe even a little bit of letdown. No big speech, no tears. Emma headed for the door without saying a word. She has finally accepted her place, Victoria remarked to her son, her voice full of smug satisfaction. Emma paused, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She turned her head just enough for them to see the side of her face, just enough for them to see her expression. She smiled. It was not a smile of sadness. It was not a bitter smile. And it was definitely not the smile of someone who had been defeated. It was the smile of a person who knew a secret they did not. It was the smile of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, preparing to take a leap that was about to change the entire game. Then she pulled the door open and left. The silence she left behind was heavy and absolute. What was that all about? Marcus asked, a new note of worry in his voice. Victoria just frowned and waved her hand as if to dismiss it. It is nothing. She is a nobody. Now, let's talk about the celebration for the initial public offering. Emma walked across the lobby of the law firm, the worn soles of her sneakers making a faint squeak on the polished marble. With every single step she took, a change came over her. Her shoulders began to straighten. Her chin came up. The hesitant shuffle of a broken woman was replaced by a steady, determined stride. In her pocket, her phone began to buzz. She glanced at her phone after pulling it from her purse. The screen showed an unknown number with a brief message. A black car is waiting outside. We have paid your father's debt. Emma froze right there in the hotel lobby as her heart began to race. It had been 22 years since her father passed away when she was only 10 years old. The official cause was a heart attack, but family members whispered it was from stress. What kind of debt was this about? Her dad was an inventor, a man full of dreams who spent his nights in a messy workshop, working on ideas that never seemed to bring in any money. How could a debt like that be connected to a black car parked out front? Emma walked through the revolving doors and out onto the street. The cold, persistent Seattle rain immediately started to fall on her. Her thin dress was soaked in just a few moments, clinging uncomfortably to her pregnant stomach. She just stood there, shivering and staring at her phone, unable to understand what the message meant. The revolving doors behind her moved once more. Marcus came out first, holding a large umbrella over himself and Arthur Higgins. Victoria came next, holding her own Burberry umbrella that likely cost more than everything Emma owned. A red Mercedes then drove up to the curb. The window came down, showing a stunning young woman with flawless makeup and a smile bright enough for a commercial. That was Jessica Lane, the vice president of marketing at Vance Tech. She was 28 years old, and for the last year, she had been Marcus's secret lover. Emma had known about the relationship for the past 6 months. She had discovered the text conversations, the hotel bills, and the expensive lingerie that was clearly not a gift for her. "Look who it is," Marcus announced with a loud, pointed tone, making sure Emma heard him. "My future." From inside the car, Jessica gave a little wave. "Honey, Victoria, get in. It is really coming down out here." Victoria started walking to the Mercedes, but then stopped. She glanced back at Emma, who was standing all by herself in the downpour, looking completely miserable. "You know," Victoria remarked, her voice dripping with the kind of smug cruelty that only the very rich can pull off. "I could never figure out what Marcus found so special about you. You have no family connections, no wealth, and no drive. You just had decent looks and a law degree you let go to waste." She opened her purse and grabbed a small handful of change, some quarters, dimes, and pennies. "This is for your bus fare, sweetheart. Think of it as a final gift from us." Victoria then threw the coins down at Emma's feet. They bounced and rolled across the wet sidewalk with a series of small clicks. Emma did not say a word. She made no move to pick them up. She showed no emotion at all. She just remained still as the rain fell on her, her green eyes locked on the woman who had made her feel worthless for 3 long years. "Let's go, Mother," Marcus shouted from the car. "She can handle it from here." The car sped off, its red taillights vanishing into the gloomy Seattle day. Emma was left alone on the sidewalk. The coins on the ground seemed to mock her. She was completely soaked, 6 months pregnant, and had only $1,247 left in her bank account, with no place to live. She had hit her lowest point. That is when she noticed a sound. It was a deep, rumbling noise, not like the usual city traffic. It was stronger, more refined. A car came around the corner. It was not just any car, but a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted a shade of midnight blue, so deep it was nearly black. The chrome on the front grille shone brightly, even in the overcast weather. It moved through the other cars like a great shark swimming through the ocean. It was silent and unstoppable. It did not pull up to the hotel on the other side of the street, nor did it stop at the bank. It came to a stop right in front of Emma, the back window lowered with a quiet, smooth sound. The face of a man appeared. He looked sophisticated, with silver hair and kind eyes that held a hint of strength. He seemed to be in his late 50s, a man who had obviously faced challenges and emerged more resilient. "Hello there, Emma," he greeted her, his voice both warm and serious. "My name is Richard Cole. I was a close friend of your father. I think it is about time we had a conversation about everything that was taken from you." Emma just stared at the man in the Rolls-Royce. Rainwater dripped from her hair, streamed down her cheeks, and saturated her ruined dress. She was trembling now, though she could not tell if it was from the cold or from the shock of the moment. "I do not know who you are," she managed to say. Richard Cole offered a gentle smile. "No, you do not. But I have known about you for your entire life. I made a promise to your father that I would always look out for you. I have honored that promise, even when you did not make it easy." He reached inside his coat pocket, took out a photograph, and held it out for her through the open window. Emma paused for a second before stepping closer to take it, using her hand to protect it from the rain. The picture was old and a little faded. It showed 2 young men in their early 20s with their arms around each other, both smiling confidently for the camera. One of them was definitely her father, James Hartwell. He looked younger than she had ever seen him, but his kind eyes and the unique way he smiled were unmistakable. She would have known him anywhere. The other young man was a youthful Richard Cole. "Your father was the finest person I have ever known. Richard said, his tone filled with a sincere sense of loss. And the very company that just abandoned you was built using his stolen ideas. Emma's head shot up. What did you say? Get into the car, Emma. It is time for you to understand the real story of your family. She knew she should not get in. That was common sense. You do not get into a car with a stranger, especially one who says he knew your deceased father. It was a basic rule of safety. But there was something in his eyes that made her hesitate, a sense of familiarity. It reminded her of how her own father used to look at her, with a combination of pride and a desire to protect her that she had not seen in anyone else's eyes since he died. And then there was that text message. Your father's debt is paid. Emma looked down at the change scattered around her feet. Then her eyes moved to the Rolls-Royce, and to the man who said he had the answers to questions she never even knew she should be asking. Somewhere in the distance, a traffic light turned green. Horns honked. The world kept moving. Emma got into the car. The inside of the car was just as impressive as the outside. The cream-colored leather seats felt like they were cradling her. The soft, indirect lighting provided a sense of comfort. The air smelled of expensive leather and a faint, pleasant cologne. It was a level of luxury she had only seen from a distance during her time with Marcus, but had never personally felt. A privacy screen separated them from the driver. Richard touched a button, and the car started to move smoothly. You will find a blanket in the compartment next to you, he mentioned, pointing. There is also some hot tea in the center console. You are drenched and pregnant. Please, make yourself comfortable. Emma found everything just as he had described. She wrapped the soft cashmere blanket over her shoulders and took a small sip of the tea. It was made perfectly, at just the right temperature. It was English breakfast with a touch of honey. How could he possibly know how she liked her tea? You have been keeping an eye on me, she said. It was a statement, not a question. For more than 20 years, Richard confirmed, ever since your father passed away. Why? Richard paused for a few seconds. The car drove smoothly through downtown Seattle, creating a quiet space away from the loud traffic and the storm outside. Your father, James Hartwell, was a true genius, he started to explain. We first met at MIT. He was the brilliant inventor, and I was the one with the business sense. We had plans to change the world together. He stopped talking for a moment, and Emma could see a look of genuine sadness on his face. Then the car crash happened. A drunk driver sped through a red light. I was the one driving. Your mother was sitting in the back. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She had heard parts of this story before, but only in bits and pieces. Her father had never wanted to discuss it. Her grandparents would only talk about her mother in quiet, hushed tones, as if saying her name would bring back an overwhelming amount of sadness. She passed away, Emma said softly. Right away. And I lost my leg. Richard moved a little, and for the first time, Emma saw that his movements were slightly stiff. Your father was the one who pulled me out of the car. He saved my life. But in doing so, he lost the love of his life, and I have never stopped blaming myself for being the driver that day. The car got onto the freeway, leaving the city center behind. Your father never held it against me, Richard went on, not for a second, but he was deeply changed by it. He poured all his energy into his work. He came up with one invention after another, creating patents that I now realize were years ahead of their time. He was working on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and neural networks. Back in 1993, your father was developing algorithms that the tech industry in Silicon Valley would not catch up to for another 20 years. Emma remembered her childhood, seeing her father in his workshop, She recalled the smell of solder and coffee, and how his hands seemed to work a special kind of magic on keyboards and circuit boards that she did not understand at the time. He needed a business partner, Richard explained, someone who could manage the business side of things so he could concentrate on the technology. I was still in recovery. I had to go through several surgeries and 2 years of physical therapy. So, he found someone else to work with. A knot of dread tightened in Emma's gut. She already sensed what he was about to say. Howard Vance, she uttered, the name tasting like poison. Richard gave a slow, deliberate nod. Marcus's father. The man was a master of charm and persuasion. He sold your father a dream about them changing the world together with new technology. Richard's tone grew cold, and then he took everything. The car exited the highway, gliding into an affluent part of town. They passed sprawling estates shielded by high green hedges and imposing wrought iron fences. Howard talked your father, James, into signing over a temporary control of his patents, right when James was overwhelmed by the medical debts from your mother's funeral. Your dad was grieving, unfocused, and far too trusting. He never bothered with the fine print. Before he even knew what hit him, Howard had shuffled everything around. The patents vanished, moved into a shell company that Howard had absolute control over. But couldn't my father have fought him in court? He certainly tried. By that point, though, Howard had deep pockets. He had backers and a team of ruthless lawyers. He drowned your father in a sea of legal paperwork and frivolous lawsuits. James burned through his last penny trying to get back what was stolen from him. Richard's voice fell to a whisper. The stress is what killed him. The official cause was a heart attack. But I know better. Howard Vance might as well have put a gun to your father's head and pulled the trigger. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, not just for the father she barely remembered, but for the brilliant man she had completely misunderstood. She'd spent her life wondering why they had to be so frugal, so careful with every dollar, when her dad was such a genius. She just figured he was a visionary who couldn't turn his ideas into actual money. The reality was 100 times worse. And what about you? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why couldn't you help him? The look of agony that washed over Richard's face was deep and real. I was still recovering from my accident. By the time I was back on my feet, James was gone, and Howard had covered his tracks so well there was nothing to find. I brought in private eyes, attorneys, even forensic accountants. For the last 20 years, I have been slowly, carefully putting a case together. The car came to a smooth stop before a pair of grand iron gates. Richard touched a control, and they glided open without a sound. Until this moment, he went on, I finally have what we need, every single document, every single transaction. Solid proof that the foundational technology of Vance Tech, the very patents that earned them billions, rightfully belonged to your father. And by law, that means they now belong to you. The vehicle proceeded up a winding driveway flanked by ancient, towering trees. At its end was a mansion that was both immense and inviting. It was nothing like the cold, sterile architecture of the Vance family estate. This place felt older, warmer. It felt like a real home, not a monument to wealth. Vance Tech is preparing to go public, Richard explained as they pulled up to the front entrance. Their initial public offering is set to value the company at $8 billion. But the second those patents are officially challenged, the moment it gets out that their entire corporation is built on a foundation of theft, the whole thing will come crashing down. A butler stepped out holding an umbrella and opened Emma's door, but she remained seated. Why wait until now to tell me? She asked. A sad smile touched Richard's lips. I did try. When you finished law school, I made an offer to finance your career. You turned me down. Emma's thoughts spun backward in a blur. The anonymous scholarship that showed up right when her savings ran out. The job interview at that top-tier firm that felt almost too easy. The downtown apartment she supposedly won in a raffle she never even entered. It was you, she whispered, the realization dawning on her. All of that was you. I just wanted to lend a hand, but you were so fiercely independent, so set on making it on your own. I had to respect that. I respected you. His voice took on a harder edge. But Emma, you ended up marrying into the very family that ruined yours. And then they cast you aside like you were nothing. You have been on your own long enough. He pressed a thick, heavy folder into her hands. It felt substantial, life-changing. Everything you will ever need is right in here. Money, top lawyers, all the access you could want. But listen to me, Emma. He leaned in, his gaze sharp and serious. I am not going to fight this battle for you. I can give you the sword, but you have to be the one to swing it. Emma stared down at the folder on her lap. It held the evidence of her father's stolen future. It was the proof that Marcus's entire fortune was built on the wreckage of her family. Her mind flashed back to the boardroom. She could almost feel the cold sting of the coins hitting the floor around her. She pictured Victoria's smug, triumphant smile and Marcus's complete indifference to their unborn child, her baby, a Vance by name, perhaps, but a Hartwell by spirit and fire. She placed a hand on her stomach and felt a gentle flutter from within. I want them to have nothing, she said, her voice soft but cold as steel. They will. And I want to be the one to do it. I want Victoria to know it was me, not you. She will know. Emma looked up at him, her eyes now completely dry and filled with a new, unwavering resolve. So, let's get to work. Once inside the mansion, she was introduced to Walter Briggs, who ran Richard's security team. He was a former federal agent with silver hair and the calm, steady presence of someone who has seen the worst of the world and is impressed by none of it. He led her to a private suite that was already prepared with clothes in her size and all the comforts a pregnant woman could ask for. She took a long shower, washing away the last 3 years of her life. She changed into soft, comfortable clothes that actually fit her changing body. She ate a nourishing meal cooked by Richard's personal chef. For the first time in ages, she slept for 12 straight hours in a bed that felt like she was floating on a cloud. The following morning, she walked into Richard's home office, sat down, and opened the folder. It was all there, a meticulous history of betrayal. There were the original patent applications from 1991. There were corporate transfer agreements bearing forged signatures. There were bank statements detailing payoffs to lawyers tasked with burying the case. There were even email chains between Howard Vance and his legal team about how to deal with the Hartwell situation. It was a complete picture, 20 years of evidence, collected with relentless patience. Tucked at the very bottom was a handwritten letter. It read, "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, my old friend Richard finally figured out a way to show you the truth. I'm so sorry I couldn't fight longer and harder for us. I'm sorry I had to leave you when you were so little. But I need you to know this. Everything I ever made, I made with you in mind. My inventions, my research, my biggest dreams. All of it was supposed to be your inheritance. No matter what anyone has ever told you about my life, your father was a brilliant man whose legacy was stolen. You are not the child of a failed dreamer. You are the rightful heir to an empire. Now go and take back what is yours. All my love, Dad." Emma read the letter 3 separate times. Then she clutched it to her chest and finally allowed herself to weep. When the tears stopped, she dried her face, squared her shoulders, and met Richard's gaze. "Tell me absolutely everything. Need to know," she said. "I am going to tear them down." 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Emma Hartwell was a completely different woman. She had gotten a haircut. It was not a drastic change, but it was a clear signal. The deep exhaustion hadn't vanished from the shadows under her eyes, but it had sharpened into something new. It was now pure determination. The brilliant legal mind that had graduated at the top of her class from Northwestern Law was finally waking up from a 3-year slumber. She had taken up residence in a brownstone on Capitol Hill, one of the many properties Richard kept in Seattle. It was not a grand mansion or an over-the-top luxury penthouse. It was simply a quiet, private place where she could focus on her work, and she worked constantly. Emma was seated at a large desk, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, open case files, and a glowing laptop with dozens of research tabs open. Across from her sat her former professor, Margaret Porter. Maggie was 60 years old, with an intellect as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, and was one of the few professional contacts Emma had kept after leaving her law career. Maggie had been her guide at Northwestern and had spent the last week helping her polish her long-dormant legal expertise. "This is excellent," Maggie commented, leafing through the draft of the patent challenge. "Truly impressive. Your argument on the chain of title is completely solid." "It has to be," Emma said, arching her back to relieve some of the pressure. Now 7 months pregnant, her body was constantly reminding her of its limits. Victoria Vance can afford the best legal team in the entire country. They will pounce on any tiny mistake, any small weakness. "You know, you could have a whole team doing this," Maggie pointed out, peering over her glasses. "Richard Cole has practically infinite funds. You could easily have an army of lawyers handling this tedious work." Emma firmly shook her head. "No, I have to know every single detail inside and out. When I stand up in that courtroom to argue this case, I can't be relying on somebody else's work." Maggie broke into a warm smile. "Now that is the Emma Hartwell I remember. Always stubborn, thorough," Emma gently corrected her. "There is a very important difference." She got up and stretched, wandering over to the window with a view of the quiet street. It was raining again, which was no surprise in Seattle. She didn't mind it anymore. The overcast sky felt like a reflection of her own mood, and she found a strange comfort in the way the constant drizzle seemed to wash the world clean. "I've been thinking about our approach," Emma said. "If I sue them directly, Victoria will see it coming. She'll rally her lawyers, and they'll bury me in legal motions before I can get anywhere. So what's the other option? I start with the patent office. I'll file a discreet complaint and ask for a formal review of the original Hartwell patents, including all the transfer paperwork." Emma turned to look right at Maggie. "Doing that places an automatic hold on any corporate deals involving those patents." Maggie's expression changed as the implication hit her. "The IPO." "Exactly. Vance Tech can't go public while its main intellectual property is being challenged. The liability for shareholders would be enormous." "That's brilliant," Maggie said, nodding slowly. "You stop their biggest move in its tracks without ever firing a shot. They won't even know where the attack is coming from at first. And by the time they do," Emma said, walking back to her desk and opening a calendar on her laptop, "I'll have everything I need. The IPO is set for 3 weeks from today. If I file on Monday, the hold will be active by Wednesday. The news should leak by Friday." "And then what?" "And then," Emma said, with a small, determined smile, "we watched the panic begin." Monday arrived with a cold, gray light. Emma chose her clothes with care, selecting a professional outfit that fit her pregnant shape but still projected an image of authority. She hadn't put on a suit in more than 3 years, and was surprised at how right it felt, like she was stepping back into a suit of armor she didn't realize she'd missed. Walter Briggs, drove her to the downtown Federal Building. He didn't ask any questions or offer his opinion. He just opened her door, walked with her to the entrance, and sat in the lobby as she went inside to handle her business. The actual filing process was over in less than an hour. It was a simple matter of paperwork, signatures, and dealing with a clerk who seemed completely uninterested until he saw the names on the documents. Then he suddenly looked nervous. Emma provided copies of the evidence Richard had gathered, just enough to get the formal review started without revealing her full strategy. "This could take a little while to process," the clerk said, choosing his words carefully. "I understand," Emma answered. "Just please ensure it is handled by the book." She walked out of the building, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't felt in years. The first piece was on the board. The game had officially started. All she could do now was wait. On Wednesday morning, Emma was woken by the buzzing of her phone. It was a text from Richard. "Turn on the financial news." She found the remote and switched on the television in her small apartment. The morning business report was already displaying breaking news banners. "The Vance Tech IPO has hit an unexpected roadblock," the news anchor announced. "Sources are reporting that a patent dispute has initiated an automatic review, which freezes the company's plans for its upcoming public offering. Analysts are shocked by this last-minute development, which has occurred just weeks before the company was expected to launch one of the biggest tech IPOs in the history of Seattle." Emma slowly sat down, resting a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, a firm and definite movement. It felt like a small celebration. "We did it, my love," Emma whispered. "We got started." Her phone began to ring. It was Richard. "Are you seeing this?" he asked. "I'm seeing it." "How are you feeling?" Emma thought about his question for a moment. On the television screen, financial experts were wildly guessing who could be behind the complaint. They mentioned rival companies, foreign powers, even corporate spies. Not one of them brought up the daughter of James Hartwell. "I feel," Emma said after a pause, "like I'm finally hitting back. This is only the first step. They will eventually figure out it was you." "I know, but I'll be ready when they do." Utter chaos had taken over the headquarters of Vance Tech. Marcus stood in his spacious corner office, watching the financial news with a jaw set so hard it seemed ready to break. Arthur Higgins was on the speakerphone, his slick voice filling the tense air. "We have no idea who filed it," Arthur explained. "The complaint is completely sealed. It could have been anyone." "I don't care who it is," Marcus snapped back. "I care about making it go away. The IPO is everything to me. My investors are already blowing up my phone. The board is calling a meeting in 2 hours. These things require patience, Marcus. The patent office has its own review process." "I don't have patience." The door to the office swung open. Victoria Vance walked in, looking flawless as ever, in a cream-colored suit that likely cost more than a car. Yet Marcus saw an emotion in her eyes that was rarely there. Fear. "Leave us," Victoria told her son. "Mother, this is my company." "I said, leave us. I need to speak to Arthur alone." Marcus glared at his mother for a long, tense moment. Then, with his jaw still locked in anger, he spun around and left the room. Victoria shut the door firmly behind him. She picked up the receiver, taking Arthur off the speaker. "Arthur, listen to me very closely. I need you to find out who submitted that complaint. Use every single resource at our disposal. Victoria, those patent filings are sealed tight. I don't care if you have to lean on every contact we have from here to Washington, D.C. Find out who it is." There was a brief silence on the other end of the call. "You have an idea, don't you?" Arthur said slowly. "You think you know who it is?" Victoria moved to the window. She gazed out at the Seattle skyline, watching the gray clouds drift in from the Puget Sound. "I think," she said in a low voice, "that our past is finally catching up with us." "What past? Victoria, what are you not telling me?" Victoria didn't answer for a long moment. Finally, she let out a sigh. "Howard made certain choices 30 years ago, choices that I have dedicated my entire life to keeping buried." "What sort of choices?" "The kind that build fortunes," she said, "and the kind that leave a trail of enemies." "Who? Who would hold a grudge for 30 years to—" Victoria's mind flashed back to the Rolls-Royce she had spotted from Marcus's car, the custom license plate with the Cole family symbol, the quick glimpse of a pregnant woman getting into the back seat. "Find out if Richard Cole has been in touch with Emma Hartwell," Victoria said at last. "Emma? Your daughter-in-law? I thought she was a nobody." Victoria's laugh was sharp and full of bitterness. "She is James Hartwell's daughter." A heavy silence hung on the line. "Oh," Arthur finally breathed out. "Oh, that is very bad. Yes, it is. And that is why I need you to learn everything you can. Now. And what if it is her? What if Emma is the one behind all this?" Victoria's reflection stared back at her from the dark glass of the window. She looked old, she looked tired, but she did not look defeated. Not yet. "Then we will crush her," Victoria said, "completely and without mercy." Emma used the rest of that week to prepare. She met with Maggie each day, going over and sharpening her legal plans. She went through every single document Richard had given her, committing to memory small details that could prove vital down the road. She ate well, slept whenever her anxious mind would allow it, and did her best to control the stress that was always just beneath the surface. On Friday night, she was studying legal precedents when her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. It wasn't Richard. She had his number saved now. Emma opened it. "I know it was you. This is not over. V." Emma looked at the message on the screen. Her heart began to pound, but she made herself take slow, deep breaths. Victoria knew the first skirmish was won, but the true war was about to begin. She thought about typing a reply. She ran through a few possibilities in her head. She could deny it. She could be defiant. She could send a witty retort to put Victoria on the defensive, but instead, she set the phone down. She didn't reply at all. Let Victoria wonder. Let her be afraid of the silence. Let her lie awake at night, imagining all the things Emma might do next. That night, Emma had a dream about her father. He was in his workshop, with all his tools and blueprints spread around him. He looked over at her and smiled. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "I'm terrified," she confessed. "That is all right. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right, even when you are." "What if I fail? What if they crush me just like they crushed you?" Her father stood up and walked over to her. He put a hand on her shoulder. It felt so warm, so real. "You are not by yourself this time," he told her. "And you are not broken. You are a Hartwell. We always get back up." Emma woke up with tear stains on her pillow and a new fire in her heart. She had won the first round, but she knew with complete certainty that the most difficult part was still ahead. Victoria Vance had not survived for 64 years in the brutal world of corporate power by being passive. Within 48 hours of finding out that Emma was the source of the patent complaint, she had activated every asset she had: private detectives, media insiders, political favors she had earned through decades of donations and carefully chosen friendships. If Emma wanted to go to war, then Victoria was going to give her one. The first attack came on a Tuesday morning. Emma was in the middle of breakfast when Maggie called. her voice strained with worry. "Turn on Channel 5, right now." Emma fumbled for the remote. The morning news was featuring a special report. The words on the screen made her stomach turn to ice. The polished news anchor leaned into the camera, her expression grave. The story was about to take a nasty turn. "We have breaking news in the Vance Tech patent controversy that has shaken Seattle's corporate world to its core. Our sources indicate the confidential complaint was filed by none other than Emma Vance, the former wife of the company's chief executive officer, Marcus Vance. But the revelations do not stop there. Insiders allege that Mrs. Vance has been collaborating with rival billionaire Richard Cole, which casts their relationship in a very questionable light. The broadcast then showed a paparazzi photo of Emma and Richard outside his grand home. The shot was framed to look compromising and deeply suggestive. While neither Mrs. Vance nor Mr. Cole could be reached for a statement, the message was loud and clear. This was starting to look less like a legal claim and more like a personal vendetta. Emma's phone began to vibrate uncontrollably as notifications flooded her screen. A quick glance at social media confirmed her worst fears. The hashtag Gold Digger. Emma was rapidly gaining traction. Vicious comments from complete strangers piled up. "She's just furious she got busted cheating." "What a classic move for a bitter ex. I bet that baby isn't even his." Who would be so hateful that they would try to wreck their ex-husband's entire company? The gold digger must not have gotten enough from the divorce, so now she wants to burn it all down. Emma placed her phone on the table, her hands trembling. An hour later, her friend Maggie arrived to find her in the exact same spot, just staring blankly at the wall. "Emma, please say something." "They are claiming I had an affair with Richard," Emma said, her voice sounding empty. "And they're raising doubts about my baby's father. Again." "It is a calculated attack on your character," Maggie insisted. "It's a classic strategy. When you cannot challenge the facts, you attack the person who delivered them." "But it is working," Emma replied, pointing to her phone, which was still buzzing nonstop. "The whole world believes their story. They see me as gold digger Emma. That is who I am to them now." Maggie took a seat facing her, her posture radiating urgency. "Emma, you have to fight back. Release a public statement. You need to control the story before they do. If I say anything, it just makes their claims seem legitimate. I will look like I am on the defensive. But if you stay silent, you are letting them win without a fight." Not long after Maggie left, Richard called. Emma watched the phone ring 3 times before she finally picked up. "I can make this whole thing disappear," Richard stated bluntly, wasting no time on greetings. "I just have to make one phone call, and this story vanishes from the news." Emma shut her eyes, tempted by the simple solution. It would be so easy to let Richard use his influence and wealth to erase this nightmare. She could let someone else handle this for her. "No," she said with finality. "This is my battle to fight. I will deal with this myself. Emma, think about your reputation. It is already in tatters. If I let you fix this, it will just make me look guilty. They claim I am using you to get back at Marcus. If you make this story go away, you will be proving them right." A heavy silence hung on the line. "What is your plan?" Richard eventually asked. "I do not have one yet, but I will find a way." She ended the call before he had a chance to object. That evening was the lowest point of her life. Emma was all alone in the dark house, with every light turned off, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The baby was still, almost as if it could feel its mother's pain. The rain outside had stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavy and suffocating. And then Emma began to weep. She had not shed a tear when Marcus handed her the divorce papers. She had not cried when Victoria mockingly tossed coins at her. She had endured 3 years of constant humiliation without breaking. But now, in the darkness, feeling the weight of the world's judgment, she finally let go. The tears flowed uncontrollably. Tears for her father, who had died with his life's work stolen from him. Tears for the mother she never got to know. Tears for the sharp, successful lawyer she used to be, before she gave it all up for a man who was never worthy of her. And tears for the child growing inside her, who might be born into a world that saw its mother as nothing more than a greedy liar. Then the baby kicked, a strong, determined kick. Emma let out a small gasp, pressing her palm against the sudden movement. She felt the tiny limbs push back, a powerful reminder that she was not by herself in this fight. "I know, little one," Emma whispered softly. "I know. We are not going to surrender." She wiped the tears from her face and took a long, steadying breath. Then she took another. The despair had not vanished, but a new feeling was rising to meet it. Something tougher, something more resolute. They wanted her to be quiet. They expected her to hide in shame while they dictated her story. But Emma Hartwell was finished with that kind of silence. From now on, her silence would be a tool, not a sign of defeat. She opened her laptop and started to write. The following morning, Emma made a call to Karen Wells. Karen was a 45-year-old investigative journalist for the Seattle Tribune. A true veteran of her field, she had built a formidable reputation by taking down corrupt corporations and exposing powerful figures who believed they were above the law. She was known for being tough, cynical, and impossible to fool. She was the perfect person for Emma's plan. They chose a small coffee shop in Ballard for their meeting, far away from the prying eyes of the city center. Karen showed up wearing jeans and a leather jacket, with her gray streaked hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She glanced at Emma's pregnant stomach, then met her eyes and sat down without any small talk. "I saw the news reports," Karen said flatly. "It has been a difficult week for you." "I have a story that I think you will be interested in," Emma began. "And it is not about me. It is about Vance Tech. It is about stolen ideas. It is about a powerful family that constructed an entire business empire on a foundation of lies." Karen's gaze sharpened. "I have heard the rumors circulating about you, Mrs. Vance. My name is Hartwell," Emma corrected her firmly. "Emma Hartwell. And every single thing you have heard about me is a carefully constructed lie designed to ruin my credibility. Now, let me show you the truth." Emma pushed Richard's file folder to the center of the table. Karen eyed it for a second before opening it and starting to read. Over the next 2 hours, Emma meticulously explained every detail. She showed her the original patent designs. She pointed out the forged transfer papers. She laid out a clear timeline that demonstrated how Vance Tech's essential technology was taken from a man on his deathbed. Karen grilled her with tough questions. She pointed out potential weaknesses. She made Emma defend every single one of her assertions. Emma met each challenge with a calm and detailed response, with the confidence of a lawyer who had thoroughly prepared her case. When Karen finally looked up, her entire demeanor had shifted. The initial skepticism was still visible, but now it was blended with something new, a deep and genuine interest. "If what you are showing me is authentic," Karen said, choosing her words carefully, "then this is an enormous story. It is authentic, and I am willing to put my name on it. I want my face and my story out there. I want everyone to know that this came from me." "But why?" "You have the option to remain anonymous. You could just let the proof speak for itself." Emma's mind flashed to the vicious hashtag. She remembered the hateful comments from strangers calling her a thief, She pictured Victoria's arrogant expression, so sure of her power to crush anyone who challenged her. "Because I have nothing to be ashamed of," Emma declared. "My father was a genius. His life's work was stolen from him, and I intend to reclaim what rightfully belongs to my family. I want Victoria Vance to be looking at my face when her world comes crashing down." Karen observed her for a long, silent moment. A slow, sharp smile spread across her face, the smile of a hunter who has found her prey. "All right, Miss Hartwell, let us go burn their empire to the ground." The story was published 3 days later. The headline was explosive: "The Vance Tech Deception, How a Billion-Dollar Corporation Was Built on Patents Stolen from a Grieving Widow." The Seattle Tribune gave it the front page. Karen Wells had been meticulous, confirming every piece of evidence, finding witnesses, and weaving a story that was both emotionally powerful and legally sound. The article had everything. It showed James Hartwell's initial patent applications. It included the documents proving Howard Vance's fraudulent transfer. It presented a timeline showing that the core technology of Vance Tech had been created in Hartwell's garage 20 years before the company even existed. And right in the middle of it all was Emma. Her full name, her picture, her entire story. The daughter of a brilliant inventor, finally demanding justice. The public reaction was immediate and massive. In just a few hours, the hashtag Justice for Hartwell started trending everywhere. It was quickly followed by Vance fraud, the very same online world that had condemned Emma just days before was now rushing to support her. Opinion articles began appearing about corporate greed and the abuse of creative minds. Legal scholars confirmed the strength of the patent claims. Financial reporters called for immediate accountability. The entire narrative had been reversed. Inside the Vance Tech building, Marcus stared at the news coverage like a man watching his own home be consumed by flames. "This is impossible," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "My father was a decent man. He started this company with nothing." Victoria stood with her back to him, gazing out the window. She had been completely silent since the article was released. "Mother," Marcus's voice was strained, "did you have any idea about this?" Victoria slowly turned around. Her face was like stone, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. They were always calculating. "Go back to your office, Marcus. Did you know?" "I told you to go back to your office." Marcus looked at his mother in disbelief. This was the woman who had raised him, molded him, and directed every step of his life. "You knew," he said, the realization dawning on him. "You knew this entire time." Victoria's expression hardened. "Do not be so naive. How else did you think this company was created? Your father was no genius, Marcus. He was a man who seized an opportunity, and I have dedicated 40 years of my life to safeguarding his legacy. Our legacy. By deceiving me? Your whole life? By providing you with everything you have. This company, this fortune, this name. Do you have any concept of what I have sacrificed to keep all of this together?" Marcus took a step back, as if he were seeing a stranger. And in that moment, maybe he was. "What did you do?" he asked in a whisper. "I did what was necessary, and I will continue to do so. Now, go to your office and allow me to manage this crisis." Marcus turned and walked out. Victoria returned to the window, looking down at the city spread out below her. Her city, her kingdom, everything she had fought for, protected, and schemed to keep. She took out her phone and called Jessica Lane's private line. "We have a serious problem," Victoria said as soon as Jessica answered the call. "I need you in my office, immediately." Back at the brownstone, Emma followed the news reports with a growing sense of astonishment. She had braced herself for denial, for heated arguments, She had fully expected a vicious counteroffensive, but instead, the entire story had flipped. The very same news outlets that had branded her a gold digger were now celebrating her as a hero fighting for justice. Maggie showed up with a bottle of champagne, bringing a non-alcoholic one for Emma. "You did it," Maggie declared, pouring a glass for herself. "You actually pulled it off." "Not quite." Emma permitted herself a faint smile. "This is only the first move. Victoria is not going to surrender that easily. Let her try anything she wants. You've got the truth on your side this time." Emma placed a hand over her belly. The baby responded with a kick, a strong and reassuring movement. "We are going to be just fine, sweetheart," Emma whispered to her unborn child. "We are going to be just fine." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she truly believed it. What she did not know was that just 6 blocks from her, inside a sleek high-rise office building, Victoria Vance was orchestrating a response that would make the previous battle look like a simple disagreement. And she had no idea that Jessica Lane had a contact inside Emma's own doctor's office, and a significant amount of money was about to be secretly exchanged. She had no idea that things were about to get much worse. For now, in this single moment, Emma let herself feel an emotion she had long forgotten. It was hope. Jessica Lane was a lot of things, but she was certainly not a fool. She had observed the entire Vance Tech disaster with the sharp, calculating mind of a master chess player watching an opponent lose. There was the patent scandal, the stock prices that plummeted, the emergency board meetings that left Marcus looking more drained and panicked each day. The company was a sinking ship, and Jessica had no plans to go down with it. However, she also wasn't about to leave with nothing to show for her time. She had put 3 years of her life into this scheme. 3 years spent with a married man, faking interest in his boring complaints about his business, and tolerating his mother's smug approval. She felt she was owed something for her trouble. That was precisely why she found herself in Victoria Vance's office at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, going over her options. "The media is tearing us apart," Victoria said, walking back and forth across her office. The calm, collected woman from a week ago was starting to unravel. "Karen Wells has even more documents. A follow-up story is coming. The board is discussing asking Marcus to resign." "What about Emma?" Jessica inquired. "Can we ruin her credibility?" "We already tried that. It failed. It only made her seem stronger. So we have to hit her with something much stronger, something that she cannot easily dismiss." Victoria stopped her pacing. She stared at Jessica with a look that was a mix of desperation and cold strategy. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jessica leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "The question of the baby's father. We brought it up when they were getting divorced, but we never had any real evidence, just a feeling, because there is no evidence. That baby is Marcus's. Does that really matter? All we have to do is plant the seed of doubt. If we can find medical records that tell a different story. Medical records are confidential. Getting them illegally is a serious federal crime. I am aware of that." Jessica smiled, the kind of smile that had charmed Marcus in the beginning, all surface appeal with a dangerous edge. "But so is patent fraud. What is one more crime?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. Outside the massive windows, the Seattle skyline sparkled, completely unaware. "You have someone," Victoria finally stated, "at her doctor's office." "I have connections everywhere. It is what I do." Jessica took out her phone. "If the price is right, we can get our hands on Emma's prenatal files. We look for anything, absolutely anything, that points to issues, conflicting information, or problems with the timeline. Then we leak it to the gossip magazines. All of a sudden, the story is no longer about patent fraud. It becomes about Emma Hartwell and her deceptions. And what if the records are clean? Jessica's smile grew wider. In that case, we create something. Medical files can be doctored. Paper trails can be created from scratch. By the time they figure out it is a fake, the harm will have been done. Victoria knew she should have refused. She was certain of it. No matter what she had done, no matter what boundaries she had crossed, she had never gone after a pregnant woman. But desperation can turn anyone into a monster. Do it, Victoria said. Do whatever is necessary. 3 days later, Emma's world turned into a nightmare. She had been sleeping more soundly lately. The anxiety was still present, but the positive Tribune story had given her something to cling to, a sense of progress, a flicker of hope. And then she looked at her phone. The headline was plastered across every gossip news website. Sterling heiress's secret, medical records suggest baby may not belong to Marcus Vance. A cold dread washed over Emma. She scrolled through the story, her hands trembling. It mentioned leaked medical files that claimed Emma had received fertility treatments before she was married, treatments that allegedly involved a donor. The documents looked incredibly authentic. They were detailed, they were convincing, and they were a complete lie. Emma had never undergone fertility treatments. She had never had a reason to. She became pregnant on her own, just 3 months after she and Marcus decided they wanted to start a family. The timing had been perfect. The baby's father was never in doubt. But none of that would mean anything to the people who read this story. She called her doctor's office right away. The receptionist's voice was shaky. "Ms. Hartwell, Dr. Patterson has been trying to get in touch with you. We had a security breach. Someone illegally gained access to your files." "I know," Emma replied. Her voice strained. "I am reading all about it as we speak." She ended the call and dialed Richard. He picked up on the very first ring. "I saw it," Richard said, before she could even get a word out. "I am getting the lawyers involved. We are going to find out who is behind this, and I do not want your lawyers." The words shot out, sharper than she had meant them to be, but she could not pull them back. She could not hold back the fury and terror that felt like it was about to swallow her whole. "Emma, this is my battle. It is mine. I will take care of it." She hung up the phone. Her breathing was fast and shallow. The world started spinning around her, and that is when the pain started. It was intense. It was immediate. It felt like a knife had been plunged into her stomach. Emma cried out and doubled over, struggling to breathe. Her sight went blurry. Her hands flew to her stomach, trying to protect her baby. "No," she whispered. "Not at this moment. Please, not at this moment." She fumbled for her phone. She tried to make a call. Her fingers refused to work. The room began to tilt. The floor came rushing up at her. The very last thing she heard, before everything went black, was the sound of her phone skittering across the hardwood floor. Emma woke up in a hospital bed. She saw a white ceiling, harsh fluorescent lights, and she heard the rhythmic beep of machines tracking her heartbeat and breathing. For a brief second, she could not recall what had happened. Then it all came flooding back. The article, the intense pain, the collapse, the baby. "The baby," Emma said through a gasp as she tried to get up. "Is the baby? Take it easy. Be calm." Maggie's face, etched with worry, appeared over her. "The baby is perfectly fine. You are both perfectly fine." Emma sank back into the pillows, relief washing over her as tears streamed down her cheeks. "What happened to me? Your blood pressure shot up because of the stress. You passed out and hit your head when you fell. The doctors are saying you have to rest. Complete and total bed rest. No more fighting. No more stress. I cannot stop. If I stop fighting now, they will win. They will take everything my father worked for, and they will walk away free." Maggie grabbed Emma's hand, her grip firm enough to demand her attention. "Emma, you have to live. Your father would have wanted that. He would want his grandchild to have a mother. This quest for revenge is not worth your life. Emma turned her head to the wall as tears streamed down her face. She was 7 months along in her pregnancy. Her name had been dragged through the mud. Again, her health was failing. And somewhere out there, Victoria Vance was likely toasting her success. This was far worse than hitting rock bottom. It was like falling into a bottomless pit. For 3 days, Emma lay motionless in that hospital bed. She ignored every phone call. She refused to look at the news. She did nothing but stare at the ceiling, feeling the gentle movements of her baby inside her. On the 3rd day, she finally spoke to Maggie. "Could you bring me my laptop?" "Emma, the doctors advised you to rest. I just need to read something," she insisted. "Only for a couple of minutes." Maggie reluctantly handed over the computer, her eyes filled with worry as Emma powered it on. But Emma did not visit any news websites. She stayed away from social media. She completely avoided the storm of coverage that was trying to destroy her. Instead, she found a folder, simply named Dad, and opened a scanned image inside. It was a letter her father, James Hartwell, had written for her 10th birthday, just 2 weeks before he died. "My dearest Emma, you are 10 years old today, and I just cannot grasp how quickly the time has passed. It feels like only yesterday I held you as a tiny baby, and now you are this incredibly bright, strong-willed, and stubborn young lady who challenges me on nearly everything. I absolutely love that spirit in you. Never let that fire go out. I realize I am not the world's greatest father. I tend to get lost in my work. I forget about birthdays, school performances, and other important moments. Your mother was always my anchor, but since we lost her, I have felt adrift. But I need you to know something I probably do not say nearly enough. You are the single best thing I have ever brought into this world. You are better than any of my inventions. You are more valuable than any patent. No matter what happens in my life, through all the failures and successes, you will forever be my proudest achievement. Be courageous, my sweet girl. Be intelligent, be compassionate, and never ever allow anyone to make you feel insignificant. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Dad." Emma read her father's letter 3 separate times. Then she shut the laptop and met Maggie's gaze. "I have been approaching this all wrong. Like a victim," Emma said, her voice measured, "just reacting to every move they make. Playing a constant defense." "What is the other option?" Maggie asked. "I am an attorney, a very good one. It is time for me to stop reacting and start building a case." She slowly pushed herself to a sitting position, fighting off a wave of dizziness. Someone broke